Welcome to the Writer Reads Short Stories. This reading is from Gulvane and the Dragon, Part 2. The poison spread rapidly. Gulvane had been a caravan guard and warrior for hire for a scant 78 years, outliving so many of his brethren that he'd had to move regions lest he be called a curse. That era ended as his vision faded. The last thing he saw was the mist knight crossbow arcing toward him. "Find me," the woman had said. The dragon dragged the bronzewood door closed, and Gulvane reached for another spell, not surprised when the dragon took and crushed it. "You are that, Gulvane," it said. "I expected nothing less. Did you know no price was ever laid on your head? That her family was forced to pay the blood price for your disappearance?" Whatever Gulvane had been expecting, it had not been that. The dragon caught his astonishment and could not hide a victorious smirk. The tattoos remained on her face. The altar was covered in the possum's blood. When her spirit refused to respond, the wizards were called. They reconstructed events so they could be seen. Her mother collapsed. Her father had to be prevented from taking his own life. Such was his shame. The council helped them recover, but the household is yet to regain its place amongst the nobility. Your name was cleared, but you could not be found. How did you learn to run so far and so fast?" Gulvane was lost for words. All those years of rage when he could have returned home. All those years of cold solitude where he had taken the lives he'd been paid for and wound himself in a shroud of aloofness to hide the loneliness of his heart. The last 3 centuries living alone in a tower where he could have had wives, a family, alliances, a tree bearing his name. He thought he'd outgrown that grief, wept all the tears required, and was surprised to find dampness streaking his cheeks as he stared into the dragon's eyes. Gulvane swallowed, tempering the emotion, tamping it behind the walls of business. "You had something you wanted to discuss?" The dragon rocked back onto its heels, mild surprise driving it to temporary silence. Gulvane pushed himself upright and disentangled himself from the sheets. Swinging his legs over the side of the bed, he summoned an overrobe and pulled it on. Wizard or not, he felt his nightshirt left him at a disadvantage. He watched the dragon regain its composure. "I wanted an elf of my own," the dragon said, raising a hand to silence Gulvane when he would have interrupted. "I didn't want just any elf. I wanted a wizard who could fight, but one who understood stealth and who didn't need magic to avoid detection. And I wanted an elven wizard who had a heart." "You stalked me?" "You attracted my attention." "When?" "The day you took the honey possum from the tree." "I what?" "You do recall it, don't you?" "I recall the day," Gulvane admitted, "but I don't recall you." "Back then, all I wanted was a honey possum to call my own." "I couldn't save the others," Gulvane said. "The storm called me out and I went as quickly as I could, but I couldn't reach the tree in time. Jambil was all that survived." "I know. I watched you swimming. Not many would have braved that current." "I didn't know the lightning had struck so deep." "Your Jambil was outside the nest." "He must have sensed it coming. He always seemed to know." Gulvane let the words go unsaid. How could Jambil have been caught and sacrificed? He thought back to the time he had sent the possum ahead, but recalled nothing in its attitude or gestures to indicate it knew it was going to its doom. "She didn't know she was going to take him then," the dragon said. "Not even a seer would have seen it, and he was preoccupied at the time." Gulvane had known that. Jambil had been unsettled for weeks, but the forester hadn't been able to work out why. He might have puzzled over it further, but the import of the dragon's words struck a chord. You were watching me, even then. You had taken my honey possum, the dragon said, won its heart so it would not leave you. What else was I to do? It had to find a mate eventually. You tried to lure him away? Gulvane was aghast. Jamble had never told him of that encounter. He refused me, so I swore him to secrecy. Have you ever been tail flicked by a possum? Gulvane had, and more than once. The memory brought a chuckle from his throat. A tail flick to a possum was like a raised finger in some human cultures, extremely rude. The remembrance was less painful than he'd anticipated, but he changed the subject anyway. Did you ever find one? One what? A possum of your own. The dragon looked away, pausing in silence until Gulvane thought he had struck a nerve. He was about to apologize when the dragon returned his gaze and replied, I raised Jambul's family. If Gulvane had not already been seated, he'd have collapsed onto the edge of the mattress. I am sorry, the dragon added. Gulvane waved it away, raising a hand and bowing his head until he had his emotions back under control. Jambul had made a family? Well, that explained a lot. Honey possums were notorious for keeping secrets. Gulvane wanted to weep, this time for not getting to know creatures he'd never met. Jambul's children. Again, he changed the subject. I cannot be what you want me to be, he said, feeling inexplicably weary. The dragon leant against the wall near Gulvane's bed and tilted his head to one side. Why not? He asked. Gulvane stared at him. Why not what? Why can't you be what I need? Because elves can only unlock one era of existence at a time. We lose the skills we learn in each, having to train for a new trade each time we undergo the change. We lose most of the memories, too. Like those of Jambu? The dragon asked in a sly tone. Yes, Gulvane snapped, like those of... What have you done? I left the door ajar, the dragon replied, and Gulvane felt panic flutter through his chest. The dragon watched him, like a mountain cat stalking a rabbit. Do you hurt? It asked. Gulvane paused, giving himself a quick once-over. No, he said. Why is that? All the teaching he'd ever had said that no elf could hold 2 lifetimes in their head at once. And yet, this time he felt the dragon give the door a definite nudge, felt his earliest memories creep into the corridor and spread slowly through his mind, finding a place where they might fit. He watched as they met and tangled with the current era of wizardry, sometimes with a minor clash, and sometimes like old friends. He glanced up at the dragon. Is it working? The dragon asked, and Gulvane gave a nervous swallow as he nodded. They remained in companionable silence, the dragon watching Gulvane watching the dragon. Will it take long? Gulvane wanted to know. The dragon shrugged. It will take as long as it takes, he said. Are you ready to remember what it was like to be a guardian of merchandise? And lives, Gulvane told him. Don't forget the lives. It was how the assassins found me, remember? The dragon favoured him with a long, careful stare, and Gulvane felt suspicion stir. Tell me you didn't send the assassins after me, he said. The dragon didn't say a word, just nudged the bronze-coloured door wider until Gulvane remembered the utter exhaustion that had claimed him at the forest's edge. With that memory came the knowledge that he had fallen almost a mile from the nearest trader's camp. What was a guard doing so far from his client? It was too far for a simple toilet stop. The dragon cleared its throat. It almost sounded embarrassed. Jambul's mate was worried. She insisted I make sure you were all right. I made sure the guard kept walking until he found you. But such a long way? He kept hearing noises, seeing shadows that might be bandits, and the camp was always close by when he looked back. You obfuscated his mind! Gulvane couldn't keep the accusatory tone from his voice. He found you, didn't he? The dragon was unrepentant. And you left him to carry me back on his own. He was strong enough. He was an old man, but not as feeble as he let you believe. Gulvane had always suspected it, but he made the excuse anyway. He was nearing retirement. And he needed a legacy, the dragon said. You gave him that. Gulvane had given him that indeed. That thought comforted him when he remembered laying a farewell kiss on the old man's brow. His father had died in his sleep on the road. Gulvane had come to wake him for his shift, and found him cold beneath his blankets. He would have been sadder if the man had not worn a faint smile, and had his face turned in the direction Gulvane had been standing. They'd taken the time to bury him before the caravan moved on. Gulvane had used every fight in the weeks after to vent his grief. He had saved more lives than he'd ended, and thwarted attacks both bold and underhanded. He had thwarted enough of the latter for his prowess to be noted, and a more specialized line of work to open. I knew you'd meet the assassins eventually, the dragon said, and by that time I foresaw a need. You did send them after me. Gulvane felt anger and let it bleed into resignation. It had been a long night, and he no longer had the energy to care. The truth of it was, the dragon could end him any time it chose.